Hello everyone, welcome to Vajiram and Ravi's Terms in News. My name is Shubhangi Singh and today we are going to discuss some important terms and concepts that have been in news from the perspective of your exam. So let us begin with the first term that we are covering today, that is Fiscal Health Index. So when we are talking about this index, this has been in news because NITI Aayog has gone ahead and launched the second edition of this very index. So let us try to understand that what exactly is this index. When we are talking about Fiscal Health Index, it is an index which brings in a whole data-driven framework which tells us about that how the fiscal performance of the given Indian states has been. Now, when we are talking about this index, it covers 18 major and then 10 northeastern and Himalayan states. This whole index is based on 5 key indicators: expenditure quality of that state, revenue mobilization, what is the fiscal prudence that is taken up by the state, debt index and debt sustainability. Based on all these factors, there is proper comparative rankings of the states that is brought out, and the rankings are also further divided into achievers, front runners, performers and then aspirational. Now tell me in the comment section which state you belong to and your state has been put in which category of this Fiscal Health Index. Now when we are talking about Fiscal Health Index, the reason it is very important and the significance here is that this is a place where states can understand their fiscal assessment and they can focus on fiscal discipline. So this Fiscal Health Index promotes the financial discipline and also the transparency. And this provides a proper evidence-based platform so that the policy reforms can come accordingly. Also, it brings in the competitive spirit and comparison through interstate comparison of what fiscal capacity stands. And all of this brings us to debt sustainability, how debt can be managed by state better in a sustainable manner and how the expenditure quality can be improved. Now the next term that we are covering today is cultural appropriation. Now the reason this particular term has been in news, we have yet again seen that cultural elements have been used by big brands. This time it is Indian jhumkas which are being used by the big luxurious name that is Ralph Lauren, and they have been called as vintage pieces. Now in this context, when we talk about cultural appropriation, it basically means when a certain community, brand uses some elements of a culture but without giving them recognition, but without giving them any benefit in the share of economic things that are coming out or giving any acknowledgement at all. So cultural appropriation will be basically adoption or use of the element of a culture which is coming from somewhere else, but there is no acknowledgement, no respect, no recognition which is given to the culture it has been taken from. Now when we are talking about cultural appropriation, the reason it is so problematic, we have to understand that it involves one dominant community, brand, and then it involves a marginalized culture which is coming, which is dying away. Furthermore, when we are talking about cultural appropriation, it also highlights commercialization of cultural symbols and practices, but the problem here is it leads to erasure of the original context in itself, and that is why cultural appropriation often lacks in terms of consent or recognition of the source community it is coming from. This is not the first time that we are seeing such an incident. Previously, Prada went ahead and used Kolhapuri chappals without giving him their recognition. When there was outrage about it, that's when Prada gave the recognition, but initially there was nothing like that. Furthermore, such incidents for Banarsi brocade, African communities and a lot of elements around them has been happening around the world. Now when we are talking about cultural appropriation, it is very important for us to understand because this brings us to the ethical concerns which exist in our societies in terms of cultural exploitation. It highlights how important identity and representation issues are. It strengthens the discourse, especially on protection of traditional knowledge. That is when we get to understand what protections exist and what can be brought in more to ensure these cultural identities are not erased. And cultural appropriation as a context in itself, very important when we are talking about debates in terms of globalization and also cultural rights. Now we will be moving on to the next term that we are doing today, and the next term is Silverpit Crater. Now when we are talking about Silverpit Crater, the reason it has been in news because it is being said that the Silverpit Crater, which is the world's most deadliest, dangerous sea related, has that mystery been solved? So the question around it have some answers finally now, and that is why this term has been in news. So when we talk about Silverpit Crater, we have to first understand what exactly it is. It is nothing but a circular geological structure, but this structure is specifically located beneath North Sea. Now when we are talking about this particular geological structure, initially it was believed that it has been formed by a meteorite impact. Now this is a 20 kilometer in diameter geological structure, and this was found through seismic survey data, and it is also characterized that it has concentric rings present. Now what exactly it is, how it exactly it has happened, is it because of the impact of meteoroid and tectonic origin? That was the mystery which was present around it. But when we talk about Silverpit Crater itself, it is the one which has given us better understanding in terms of Earth's geological evolution. It has improved the accuracy in terms of seabed and hydrocarbon exploration, and it is a very good example when we want to understand the evolving nature of scientific interpretation, that how it can be understood that what exactly has happened. Now on this note, we will be moving to the next term that we are covering today, that is force majeure. Now when we talk about force majeure, this term has been a lot in news, especially since Iran-Israel-USA conflict has broken out. This particular time, Iraq has gone ahead and declared that force majeure will be applied on foreign operated oil fields, especially because Strait of Hormuz has been blocked and there has been a lot of disruption over it. Now when we talk about force majeure, what exactly it is? When we talk about force majeure, it is a contractual provision. So if you are looking into a contract, this will be usually a provision which will be present. In the contract, there will be a provision for this. Provision for what? That the parties which are involved, they might be relieved from fulfilling the obligations which are present in the contract if something extraordinary happens, which is beyond that control, which they cannot help. Now this is something that parties put as a clause, as a provision in the contract, if they have to fulfill the obligations, but if something extraordinary out of their hand happens, just like this war, then they might be relieved from fulfilling the obligations. So when we are talking about force majeure, it is usually applied in unforeseeable or unavoidable events. It can include disaster, war, pandemics, government action, and it is also recognized in Indian legal framework through Indian Contract Act of 1872 as well. But when we are talking about this specific contractual provision, it requires the impossibility, that it was actually beyond control, not that it cannot happen. It cannot be used when there is inconvenience. It can only be used when there is impossibility in itself. Now on this note, we will be moving to the next term that we are covering today. That is Nagoya Protocol. Now when we are talking about Nagoya Protocol, the reason it has been in news because Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has submitted India's first national report on the implementation of Nagoya Protocol. Now when we are talking about Nagoya Protocol, now this is an international agreement which exists under Convention of Biological Diversity, that is CBD. Now when we are talking about CBD, this convention was signed in 1992 Rio Summit for the conservation of biodiversity, fair and equitable sharing of the benefits which are coming from the genetic resources and its protection. Now when we are talking about Nagoya Protocol, it is based on the fact that there should be proper access and benefit sharing mechanism when we are talking about usage of genetic resources. It talks about prior informed consent which should be involved, and this protocol operates through mutually agreed terms. So this helps in protecting the traditional knowledge and also the biodiversity which are present. Can you tell me the other protocols which exist as per the conventions which were signed in the 1992 Rio summit? Now that was all from my side. Thank you so much.